Hello and welcome to Crowd Church, coming to you live from Liverpool this Sunday night. My name is Matt Edmundson, and whether this is your first time or whether you've been part of our journey since the beginning, it's brilliant to be with you. We are a community of people figuring out what it means to follow Jesus in real life. Not the polished, perfect version, but the messy, genuine, brilliant reality of this whole thing called Christianity. So let me give you a little roadmap of what's going to be happening over the next hour. We'll have a talk, lasts about 20 minutes, looking at the topic of relationships, which is the section of our series, Becoming Whole, that we are looking at, exploring how Christ makes us whole across every domain of life. After the talk, we've got Conversation Streets. Oh yes, this is where we dig into what you've just heard and you get to be part of that discussion. So if you're with us live, jump into the comments, share your questions, your thoughts and your stories. And of course, if you're watching on catch up or listening to the podcast, then thanks for being part of the crowd too. Right, let's meet your hosts and let's get started.
Welcome to Crowd Church. It's great to be here with you today. Today I am joined by the wonderful Jenny Mariner.
Evening. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you. So what are we up to this evening?
So we're on part 3 of the little marriage section we're doing in the whole Being Whole series, and a little bit on marriage, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a tricky one today, isn't it?
Yeah, we're looking at conflict, which, let's be honest, I think all of us experience one way or another in marriages and in other scenarios. So I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today will be relevant,
yes,
even if you're not married.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an essential thing just for life, how to cope with conflict, how to work through it, well, I was going to say win, but I think that's a bad thing to say. I think Matt would say that's probably one of the problems. But how to both be winners.
How to navigate conflict well and maintain good relationships. I think that's what we're hoping to unpack.
I think that sounds a lot better. Well, Matt's going to speak to us, so I think let's hand over straight to Matt.
Well, good evening, Crowd Church. Great to be with you. Tonight we're looking at conflict. What if you're wrong about being right? That's the question, which I think is a pretty hard question, isn't it? Especially in communication where we disagree and conflicts arise, whether that's in our marriages or in our friendships or in our work relationships, wherever it is. And this is it's the question we're asking ourselves today. What if I'm wrong about being right? Now, have you ever tried to disagree with someone who is 100% convinced that they are right? Not because you're that person. Obviously, you're never that person that's convinced they're 100% right. But we've definitely spoken to someone that is 100% right. And it's really, really hard, isn't it, to challenge them. And in Christian circles, we have this special kind of language that we like to put around it, like, I'm approaching this with humility, which usually means I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm right, but I've told God that in the really, really unlikely event that I could be slightly wrong, he should point it out to me in the most clear and obvious way possible. But until he does, I'm right. Now, I've had a lot of these conversations with people over the years in this sort of exact scenario, but let me tell you, that's not humility. Actually, that is pride. And before we get too far in our memory banks, replaying those sort of conversations, we do have to ask ourselves that sort of uncomfortable question. How often do we do exactly the same thing? How often do we approach a conversation or a disagreement knowing that we are right? And if you're a Christ follower, how often do you use spiritual language to justify that position? My favorite one being, God told me. Now, it's not just in the church that we have this particular problem. I think we're living through what I would call extraordinary times here in the UK right now. I mean, they are a bit bonkers. And researchers are calling it affective polarization. Great term. It's where we don't just disagree with anybody else anymore. We don't just disagree with their ideas. Actually, we've taken it to the next level, well, actually more than the next level, because we've moved from disagreeing to actually hating them as people. So it's no longer, I think you're wrong, but actually, fundamentally and wholeheartedly, I think you are evil, and I think you're dangerous. And I think it's a bit of a problem, right? So we have now in the UK free speech rallies. But there are speakers literally standing on stage calling for the banning of all public expressions of non-Christian faith. There are also cases where Christians are arrested and investigated because someone, perhaps from another faith, or another people group don't like what they are saying, and we see videos all the time of street preachers getting arrested. But how's that free speech? And it leads us to this idea then that free speech works as long as it aligns with my views. And if it doesn't align with my view, then it's not free speech, it's hate speech. And the government's response to all of this, well, not a big fan of criticising the government all the time, but I don't think it's particularly been great, as we've seen a sort of a huge crackdown on free speech, and we see police now are making over 30 arrests a day for offensive online posts. And this cultural narrative is beginning, I think, to sort of seep into our homes, into our marriages, and even our churches to some degree. And I think as Christians, we should be on guard for this, because I do not think it is biblical thinking. And I definitely don't think it's biblical thinking around politics either. Because in all this political tribalism, Christianity, for me, genuinely transcends it. And it subverts this sort of left and right political spectrum in ways actually that I think should make both sides really, really, really uncomfortable. Christianity doesn't fit neatly into political boxes because I think it operates from a fundamentally different premise than secular political ideologies. So Jesus, when we look at him, he came to orient us toward heaven first, to seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness. He didn't come to orient us towards the left or to the right. And so I think we have to be really careful not to weaponize our Christianity for our political viewpoints, to exasperate them and to exasperate the problem. It's as if we've forgotten the fundamentals of how to communicate and how to dialogue, and even, dare I say it, how to disagree and to do that well. So James, the brother of Jesus, who's a bit of a legend, says everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And I think we've completely flipped that script, haven't we? I think it's totally inverted. We're quick to speak, we're slow to listen, and we're really, really, really quick at becoming angry. But if we did as James suggests, and if we become quick to listen, I think then we spend more time trying to understand the other person, that person in front of us. There's a book in the Old Testament called Proverbs, which is called like the wisdom book, and it's basically a book of sayings. All very wise sayings, but it is really, really brutal on occasions, isn't it? It just absolutely pulls it out. And in Proverbs 18:2, it says that fools, and I want you to pay attention to the word fools, fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. Sometimes, right, when you come to the Bible, all you can say is ouch. ouch, right? That's one of those moments. Fools take pleasure in not understanding, right? There's no pleasure in that. They're not quick to listen. They're not slow to speak. They're the opposite of that, and they delight in being heard. Now, we may think we're actually being humble because we're willing to have a conversation. But if you've already decided ahead of time that you're right, you're not really having a conversation, are you? You're more delivering a verdict. And maybe, according to Proverbs, being a fool at the same time. And like I say, all you can say is ouch. Now, my observation, people usually fall into one of two camps when it comes to disagreements. We have the winners and we have the avoiders. The winners and the avoiders. Now, the winners decide they're going to win the argument, right? I'm right, you know I'm right. I just need, to marshal the facts, the logic, the evidence, and everyone will see that I'm in fact right. Now, if you don't know me, if you've never really sort of connected with us at Crowd before, you may not know that I run my own business. I have a company. We have a team in that company. And if I'm really, really honest, there is a certain amount of ego required for that role. Now, I have to believe that I'm right enough to back my decisions, right? But I definitely need pushback on those decisions. This is something that I've learned over the years, sitting on various boards for PLCs, for charities, right? There's power in having around you people who think differently. And so I created a board for my own company. And it doesn't matter about shareholding, who owns what shares, but we all have equal votes. So recently, when I decided to make when we had to make big decisions about our company, the board pushed back on my suggestions, which, if you know me, I found deeply annoying, but also very, very helpful. Now, it was annoying because I thought I was right? It just was. But it's helpful because it makes me think about things properly. And I think ultimately we reached the right decision by doing that. And I'm still learning, to see disagreements as opportunities rather than sort of battles that I have to win. So if I approach communication with this sort of winner mindset, especially in my marriage, this idea of I must win, then I think you're going to run into problems because you may win the argument. I mean, you may win it completely. They have nothing left to say. Your logic is airtight. And yet, something's broken between you. Something is broken between you and them, and facts just cannot fix it. You may be right, but you're alone. You've gained the argument, perhaps, but you've lost the person. The other one we have are the avoiders. Now, all of this sort of extreme noise that we've been getting recently, all this gerrymandering from the left and from the right, has created what researchers call a spiral of silence. A spiral of silence is a great phrase. People have stopped expressing their views because they think that it will be unpopular. And we've actually become now genuinely afraid to express opinions on anything controversial. Maybe you're not the person then who needs to win every argument. Maybe you're the person who avoids them entirely. Just don't rock the boat. Don't bring it up. Keep things pleasant, please. Peace at any cost. And at first, this strategy might work well. There's no fights. There's no tension, everything seems calm, and you tell yourself that you're a bit of a genius because, you're picking your battles. You're not making a fuss over the small things, and there is a place for that. But actually, in that, not only are you avoiding the conflict, you're actually avoiding the connection. The things that matter most then go unspoken. And I think that hurt, that resentment builds up and it grows quietly and subtly, and you might not even know it, but it's there and it's building. A bit like mold behind a wall that you can't see until the damage is catastrophic. So one day, right, and it could be tomorrow, it could be in a month, it could be next year. But some point in the future, something small is going to happen, right? And you are going to explode. And all of that suppressed hurt, all of that anger, all of that, whatever it is going to come out of you at once. And your friends, your partner, your spouse, your family, they're going to be seriously blindsided because they had no idea that this was building. So you may have kept the peace. But I think the net result of this actually is a loss of intimacy as well, right? And as things build up, you start to withdraw, even if it's just a little bit. And so actually you start being more roommates rather than life partners, navigating, all of this stuff together. The Bible tells us, it's a really interesting verse, right? It says, Paul, writing to the Corinthian church, said, if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, but didn't love others, I would be nothing. I just love that phrase, right? If I understood all of God's secrets. And this speaks to the winners, doesn't it? Knowledge without love destroys. So you can understand everything. You can have all the facts. You can have all the figures. You can even understand all the secrets of God himself. But without love, it's not going to work for you, right? But Jesus also speaks directly to the avoiders. In Matthew's gospel, he says, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. So you go, you tell them, right? You go, you tell them. You don't store it up. You don't pretend that everything's fine. So biblical love doesn't demand you win, but it also doesn't allow you to hide. And remember, in all of this, right, the goal, the fundamental goal in all of this, that verse in Matthew 18, if you read the latter part of it, it's all about resolution. It's all about restoration. It's all about winning people. It is never about vindication. So in Ephesians, the Apostle Paul is writing to a church that has very similar issues to what we face now. A lot of communication issues were going on in that church. And he gives them 6 practical principles, which we are going to run through, because they're really, really good, right? So make sure you're taking notes. Number 1, Paul writes this: stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all parts of the same body. So stop telling lies, right? Tell the truth. This, especially in your marriage, means complete transparency. No hidden websites, men. No secret social media accounts. No private text messages that exclude your spouse. Marriage is not a place for secrets. So if you can't share it with your spouse, there's a really strong chance you should not be doing it. Just putting that out there. Number 2, don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. It's quite fascinating language, isn't it? Control your anger and basically deal with it quickly. And I think this whole idea of not letting anger control you is fascinating, and not letting the sun go down on your anger. So you have to understand your anger, and you have to deal with it quickly. Don't give the devil a foothold. Why? Because unresolved anger ferments into something like super toxic. And I've seen this over the years as well, where small things become mountains when we just let them fester. So if you just look at what's happening in the UK at the moment, in our society, this is what I see. Anger has built up over years. People have kept things and not said things. Maybe it's this spiral of silence, but all of a sudden it is exploding all over the place, and people are venting like there's no tomorrow. So in your marriage especially, keep short accounts, deal with these things and deal with them quickly. Number 3, one of my favorites. Don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement. So, watch your words, right? And I think, Christians, listen up, this should be our guiding principle especially on social media, right? It breaks my heart that it's becoming, I think, harder and harder to tell Christians apart on social media from non-Christians. The way we speak, the contempt in our words, this tribal anger which is building, we sound just like everyone else. Except I think we're called to be different. We're called to be salt and we're called to be light. So when we consume primarily this sort of politically charged content, what happens? Well, I think we get discipled, and we get discipled by social media, by anger, by fear, and by tribal thinking, rather than by the Holy Spirit. And so we do the opposite of what Paul says in Romans 2, where he says, do not be conformed to this world. But that's exactly what we do. We start conforming our speech and our emotional responses to match our political tribe, rather than our spiritual calling. But the countercultural narrative of Christianity, I think, gets compromised in this scenario when we can't tell the difference between a Christian and a politically engaged atheist based on how they talk online. It's a little bit scary. So your words, according to the Apostle Paul, should build up, not tear down. They should be characterized by grace and truth, and also, I think, focus on the gospel. Number 4, get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as every type of evil behavior. That's a pretty encompassing verse, isn't it? But the interesting thing about this verse, you have to ask, who is the subject of the sentence? Right? Who's Paul talking to? He's talking to you, not to them, not to your spouse, but you, right? This is where the Bible, I think, on many occasions talks about the importance of personal responsibility. And this is such an occasion. Deal with how you communicate. Get rid of the bitterness and the rage. Stop holding on to stuff. And you may have every right to feel how you do, but get rid of it anyway, because I don't think on any kind of level it's helping you. So Paul reminds us that love, right, keeps no record of being wronged. I love this verse because it reminds me of a story I heard once from a fellow. He said, whenever my wife and I get into an argument, she doesn't become hysterical, she becomes historical. And I think we have to stop that. We have to stop being historical in our arguments. We have to stop bringing up a failure from 1992. It's time to let it go, right? Number 5, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. Be kind. Be kind. Is the way you are speaking to that person, to your spouse, to your friend, to your work colleagues, is it kind? Is what you're about to post on social media kind? Now, let's be clear, kind does not mean soft, and it does not mean weak. And actually, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is confront the issue directly. Kindness isn't about being quiet. It's not about avoiding the difficult conversations. Kindness is just about communicating with a tender heart in them. And being tender-hearted, if I'm honest with you, I think is just being the first to apologize. Something that I learned early on in my marriage. I learned this principle well, let me tell you. I can't even remember what Sharon and I were talking about, but I do remember making a deliberate decision to apologize. I sat in my study and I'm like, I thought through and I wrote things down and I examined what I'd contributed to the conflict rather than defending my position, which would have been the easier thing to do. And when I did, guess what, right? Both our guards came down and we could actually have a real conversation and get to the heart of the issue. And Jesus puts it this way in his own incredible style. Why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? Hypocrites. First get rid of the log in your own eye. Where do you go with that, right? The chances are really, really high that you have what Jesus called a log or a plank in your own eye. So apologize for that. Own it. Don't hide from it. Own it. and then be the first to apologize. And I appreciate, right? That is a lot easier said than done, right? I know, I get it. This is really hard. The hardest thing to do is to let go of the belief that you are actually right, especially when your emotions are involved. I mean, it just is. But without a doubt, I'm convinced 99 times out of 100, there is always something that you can own and that you can apologize for. Own what you can own and apologize for that, and start there. Number 6. In all of this, Paul ends by saying, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. Now that's the game changer, right? So when you remember how much you've been forgiven, your pride, the defensiveness, the offense, the need to be right, the ways you've hurt God and others, when you remember what you've been forgiven, it becomes easier to extend that same grace to your spouse. So what does this look like practically? Well, for me, it involves all of the tools, let me tell you. I journal, I pray, I walk. Quite often, I will do all 3 together. And I always try and do it within a day because I never want that to fester in me, get rid of all bitterness. So I've got to do that. I've got to go and get that bitterness out. And recently, life has been, it's been a bit busy. And I have not been spending as much time with Sharon as I should or as she deserves. And Sharon was feeling it. And I could have justified it because as men, I think we're great at justifying work and busyness. But that's not the point, of course. No, you've got to get rid of the log out your own eye. So I apologized, and it led us to talking things through that needed addressing. And it wasn't the, I'm sorry you're upset, I'm sorry you feel that way kind of apology, because that kind of apology deserves a slap in the face, just saying. But actually take time to think about what I'd done and what I needed to apologize for, and deeply and properly repent and apologize for it. So, biblical love does not avoid conflict. I think it expects conflict, and I think it endures conflict. The modern cultural narrative may view conflict as a sign that the relationship is failing somehow, but I think Scripture sees it in a different way. I think Scripture sees it as an opportunity for love to be refined and to be deepened. Now, if you're like me, you will spend a lot of time thinking about heaven and what it's going to be like. I'm looking forward to a lot of things about heaven. I'm looking forward to sliding down those streets of gold in my socks because I think that'll be fun. But one of the things I'm definitely looking forward to is there being no crazy social media posts or statements, right? No bickering, just good old-fashioned conversation with curiosity, and kindness and humility. I mean, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? I just love this idea, but I don't think we have to wait for heaven before we as Christians start practicing that. I think we have to learn biblical ways to communicate, to be curious, and not be right all the time, especially in our marriages, but actually with everyone, if I'm honest with you. Like I said, it's almost like a missing skill that we used to have that we somehow forgot, We did communicate, but now we're sort of reverting back to being cavemen, and shouting. Only now we have really, really sophisticated language to make it sound super, super smart. If we really learn to communicate with our spouse and with each other in a way that reflects both grace and truth, in a way that is both clear but also kind, what a difference that would make. It's a kind of communication that I love. To learn to disagree well, to debate, without being offended, to be okay with people not agreeing with me and me not crumbling into this blubbering mess on the floor because you don't like what I think or what I say. We can demonstrate, I think, as Christians that another way is possible. When everyone else has forgotten how to be human with each other, I think we can do it. So here's my challenge. Next time you think you're right, ask yourself, what if I'm wrong about being right? Be the first to apologize, not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to value the relationship over being right. Start there and let's see how it goes.
Wow. Amazing. Isn't it? Like, it's such, talking about this in marriage, it's such a great thing to be in a marriage and be with someone who's different to you. So there's going to always be conflict because you're different. We're all unique. And it's great that the Bible has so much about that. And yeah, I really like that talk. Jen, before we sort of move on, is there anything that sort of jumped out to you first that you'd like to mention?
Oh, I mean, it was great, wasn't it? And as we said at the beginning, there's so much that's relevant for marriage, but relevant for any relationship. I think that one of the things that actually jumped out to me was if you're in the second category and you're an avoider, I would really encourage people to try and tune into what you're actually feeling. That's probably one of my kind of reflections on people that can be in that camp. So I don't know who's watching and you thought, oh yeah, I like to be a winner, oh yeah, I like to be an avoider. But I think sometimes avoiders can actually not even be that self-aware. And if you're actually not self-aware of your own feelings and don't even realise that you're avoiding conflict, then that can have a whole heap of problems.
Yeah.
You know, like Matt said, it's like mould behind a wall. And actually, when the wall finally comes tumbling down, it's all your partner's fault. And you don't realise that actually you let the mould grow. So that would be one of my things. I was like, yeah, actually, you know, we really need to take responsibility in any relationship, don't we, to know what we're feeling and to know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And to know, I'm avoiding this. Is that a good thing?
Yeah.
Or is it time for me to actually address it?
Yeah.
To be really self-aware. That's the thing that kind of jumped off to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about that.
No, I really like that. And there's a verse in Galatians, and it says, make a careful exploration of who you are and the work that you've been given, and then sink yourself into that. Don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. Each of you must take responsibility for doing the creative best you can with your own life. And I think sometimes we can blame other people and think, well, I am right, and not look at ourselves and go, what can I do to be the best that I can? What can I do to be the best husband? I know when we were talking before about avoiders, before the live stream, about avoiders and winners, I was thinking, when I read that, I thought, I often was an avoider because I wanted to be a winner and I didn't know how to do it, so I just wouldn't say anything. But it came to a point in our marriage, and what Matt said, and I wrote it down, was if you avoid, you lose connection. You miss some of that closeness that you could be having in your marriage or in your relationship because you're just not prepared. And it might be a bit painful, that conflict. It's not easy, is it? It's gonna require you to be humble and require you to realize that you've both done wrong or said things wrong, but the outcome is worth it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it, the avoider thing? Because I think if we're honest, we go through seasons where we're one or the other.
Yeah.
I like what Heather put in the comments. She said, my husband and I are both winners, so it leads to some fiery arguments or fiery conversations, which I think, yeah, I get that. I do get that. And I think sometimes, because we're not perfect, right? Sometimes we avoid, sometimes we just go all out for the kill. You're like, right. How many times have you rehearsed an argument in your head, right? Your spouse has offended you and you're like, right, I'm going to write this down. I'm going to go to AI. I'm going to Google this. I'm going to get everything that I need. And you've rehearsed the speech 1,000 times in your head. And it never works out like you think it's going to work out, right? It just doesn't. But I do think the thing that I've noticed in myself and in other people is when we avoid the conversation, we do withdraw a little bit. Sometimes we withdraw a lot, but sometimes it's a little bit. And I think that's the thing that we can own as avoiders. It's like, yes, your spouse may have offended you. Yes, they may have. But by not confronting that, that's the thing which you own. That's the logging your eye. That's the... Because actually what you're doing is you're withdrawing emotionally a little bit. Mainly to protect yourself, perhaps, from that happening again. But, yeah.
Yeah. And it's different in a marriage, isn't it? With the conflict and resolution we've just been Matt's talked about is... really useful for all aspects of life, but in a marriage we've got that got that covenant relationship. So it's not something, some conversations, some differences between people, you might say, well, it's probably easier we just don't talk about that, or probably easier with them we don't meet because that causes too much rift. But in a marriage, you've got to spend time sorting that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, I think, like Matt says, you've got to do everything you can to maintain that intimacy in a marriage, haven't you? And I think particularly, like, for a lot of people, the pattern is you get married and then at some point there's going to be some kids come along and then life gets extremely busy, and actually you can end up realising you're functioning alongside each other very well, but you're not connected. And it's such an important thing to maintain, isn't it? Connection.
Yeah. And it's, just as a personal testimony, it's worth it. I mentioned a few weeks ago about a whole cleaning the cooker incident, and it all went a bit pear-shaped, and we had to get the pastor of the church, and we called them up and said, that was just the tip of the iceberg, and it just broke the camel's back. And but ever since then, we've had to communicate better, and we've had to learn, we've had to stop the avoiding, and the intimacy is just, we've got such a better relationship now. And that was quite a long time up to that point that we thought everything was, it wasn't bad, but I was missing out. And I think that's one thing about avoiding. Don't miss out. Yeah.
No, it's a really interesting point. I'm just looking at what Ellis put here in the comments. I have an insistence on having to be right no matter what, which ironically is itself wrong. Thanks for saying that, Ellis. I think it's an interesting point, isn't it? How do you guys handle this need to be right? Or maybe you don't have to handle it. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. I hate being wrong, right?
Yeah.
I hate it with a passion, especially when I know I'm right. So how do you deal with that in yourself when you sense that and feel that?
Well, one thing I have found is that, so often between me and Lisa, and then also I used to have a guy work for me, and we'd get into arguments or just tension. And a lot of the time we'd realise we were both actually meaning the same thing. It's just our communication was bad, and the way we were saying things was confusing the matter. And I think with me and Lisa, I've had things that I've thought, I'm right on this, and then realised after lots of discussion, we're both pretty similar on the outcome. And there was little nuances that we talked about and realised that, oh yeah, Lisa's got a good point about that, or Dan's got a good point about that, and that not saying that's all the time, but a lot of the time that happened, that we weren't as far apart as we thought we were.
Yeah. I think there's also something as well about still addressing it and figuring out, like, is this something that we just need to agree to disagree on, but still do that in relationship? Is this something we have to solve? And so, like you said, we're just going to have to keep coming back to it. We're going to have to go and get somebody else to help us. But again, particularly in a marriage where you're trying to maintain that covenant, if you don't deal with it one way or another, it's going to drive that wedge, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I think you can sometimes, if it's something simple, it can become almost a joke. Like, there are things in our marriage that is a bit like, you think this and I think that. But we've talked it through, and it genuinely is a joke. We've just agreed to disagree. And then other stuff, we've done it a couple of times. It's been like, we have to solve this.
Yeah.
So we have to go and get somebody else to help us.
Yeah.
Because, to not deal with it or to just keep butting heads, it's going to have a bad impact on that intimacy in the end, isn't it?
Yeah. So what happened when you did that? Who did you go see, and what did they tell you? Without obviously divulging sensitive information.
We both went to see different wise couples in the church that we trusted, and to be honest, in both cases, they just really were able to help us talk it through, not particularly quickly, but help us hear each other's point of view a little bit more, help bring other perspectives in. I think in one of the scenarios, one of us, they were like, well, this isn't really about right or wrong. This is actually about how you're both feeling. And it was one of those scenarios where it's like, well, you might be right, but if, the other partner doesn't want it that way, then, this isn't just about right or wrong. So it was just, I think, having other voices, because otherwise it is just, can become, well, who's going to win or who's going to back down?
Yeah.
And just having somebody else, neither resolved in one conversation, but both were completely resolved in just being able to have somebody else help break that tension.
That's such a cool thing, isn't it? And I think that is humility, to actually go, we can't solve this ourselves, let's go get some help.
Yeah.
And being okay with that, I think, is super, super important. I've done it in business relationships, as well. So you can extend that principle out. And I think definitely, if you're at an impasse, then go get some help, because it's worth definitely resolving, without a shadow of a doubt. So, let's talk about. So we've all talked about social media, right? Love it, hate it, mostly hate it, if I'm honest with you. But, we use it as a tool to get the gospel out there. So, it has its advantages in some respects. But one of the things that I've noticed, right, is I don't know if you've seen this, you go to a restaurant and there's the quintessential couple, probably in their mid-20s, early 30s. They're both on their phones. Or you're around somebody's house. We do this. I mean, we've got quite a tall house. So if I'm downstairs, I'll call Zoe if she's upstairs, right? Because I can't be bothered to get out of the chair and just go upstairs. I just can't. And it's fascinating to me how the rise of social media, the rise of the short-form content has infiltrated our conversations. Do you know what I mean? And so you can't sit and have a conversation in a restaurant now without getting your phone out or checking things, or you... How do you guys manage the phone things in your marriages?
For me, for us, it's a conscious thing that we do have to. We're on our phones a lot and have to consciously go, okay, I'm not looking at that, and also realizing my excuse was, well, especially in the daytime, I need to be on. I run a business and it's just me. I need to be on my phone and checking emails and all that kind of stuff. It's not that urgent, there's times when I can just go, well, I can put that down, I can wait, and I can do it all together in one go. It doesn't have to be a constant thing. And going back to the social media, I think we were talking before about marriages that we've seen that are breaking down, and often it is this sort of Instagram, Facebook. We're so used to statements. Oh, that's a good statement, but there's no conversation. And if you've got a life that has that sort of statement lifestyle, you're missing out on the conversation. That what you said might be right, or there might be something on there that isn't right, and you need to converse it. And you can just the Proverbs, which you quoted from, there's so many things about. It says a wise person seeks counsel. You've got to, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. We have quite a lot of rules in our house that we've kind of put together to try and help us. So we try and sit down for meals together where we can, and phones aren't allowed at the dinner table. Phones aren't allowed in the bedrooms. In terms of the first thing in the morning, last thing at night. We try really hard, going back to the thing about connection, we try to plan in times where we will connect, even if we're not spending money. So an evening we will have a meal at home together, even if it's not a fancy one. Do you know what I mean? The phone will go away and we're sat eating together and we will have a conversation. Or it's different for everybody, isn't it? Because I know sometimes actually that's quite awkward, just sat staring at each other, and it's actually awkward. But is it, I don't know, doing a jigsaw, going for a walk? Do you like running together or cycling together? Or, what is going to be the thing for you that you can put in regularly where you're then just both present?
Yeah.
Because we find the tension builds up if we don't do that, because just the run-of-the-mill stuff isn't coming up and being chatted about. Trying to have those intentional times where actually the phone is not allowed. Yeah.
Did you find that when you made that before you made that decision, it was, or when you made that decision, it's something you had to learn again? That's what we found if we're going out for a meal or something, I'm so used to looking at it. I had to learn to just look at my wife, just look at who I'm with, and not not have that.
It's so, I mean, it's a whole other thing, isn't it? But it's so addictive,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's constant. And both me and my husband find that we go through seasons when we're more addicted and find more excuses. Anyone notice that? You find more reasons why you're on your phone.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, for all kinds of different elements of health, I think we would be terrible if we weren't trying proactively to be on top of it. It would be awful.
Yeah.
I think with the phones, it's they can. I find that what I did was I stopped checking the phone, but I got an Apple Watch, and of course all your notifications come up on your Apple Watch. And actually, I've got to the stage now where I can't read the Apple Watch anyway, unless I've got my glasses on. So I'm quite grateful for that. I just know something's happened. I don't know why. They'll call me if it's an emergency. It's one of those, isn't it? The other thing I did was I got a second line. So I can separate business now, and only like a handful of people have that second number. And so if it's important, they'll get through to me, right? And that works crazy well. But I also have a watch that's not an Apple Watch, which I will wear when I go out with Sharon, because I'm going to get into trouble if I don't. The other thing that we do, which has worked really well, is if we go out as a family, we take a deck of cards.
Yes, we do that.
And we play cards, like in restaurants and stuff.
Yeah.
That's always great fun.
Lots of Uno.
I lose all the time. Zoe beats me all the time, which you enjoy, don't you, Zoe? And it's just, but we'll play rummy.
Yeah.
We don't gamble. There's no money. I just want to point that out, right?
On a technical thing, you can now, I should imagine Android as well, you can do summary notifications. So most of the things that pop up, you can just say, I don't want that to pop up now. Just summarise it in the morning, in the evening. And I've done that. Made a massive difference. Yeah. I didn't, McDonald's didn't tell me at like 10 o'clock, oh, this is happening. Just cut that out.
Have we got time for me to ask another question?
Yes. Yeah.
Another one I think is coming up a lot in this day and age is like, maybe we're just not compatible. Maybe I just picked the wrong person. Maybe like this is just too much, and the best thing for us to do is just go our separate ways. What do we reckon, guys? What does the Bible have to say?
This is such an on-topic conversation, isn't it? Compatibility. There is let's just be clear. You are not compatible. Fundamentally, you are flawed human beings, right? And so there is going to be an element of tension and disagreement. This is not the Cosbys. Life is, Adam and Eve didn't see the right eye to eye before the fall. So it's just one of those things where you kind of go, don't be surprised if marriage is not what you think it should be because you have seen a happy married couple on social media and you've seen all their reels, right? Life is not like that. It's complicated, it's messy. So first and foremost, you are not compatible, not 100%. That said, I'm of the opinion that if you make a covenant promise, then that is a promise, right? Now, we've talked about, we were talking about earlier, weren't we? The 3 A's for divorce. Like there are biblical ways to end a relationship, a marriage, but assuming that they're not there, right? So that there's no adultery, there's no abuse, and there's no abandonment. It's just a couple who cannot get on, right? And we've had that scenario, lots and lots of times couples have come to see us, and fundamentally, they cannot see a way to make it work. And we are seeing it more now if the husband has a different political viewpoint to the wife. This is becoming where it's becoming more and more acute. So if he's right-wing and she's left-wing, or if she's right-wing and he's left-wing, especially with this, what we talked about earlier on, this belief that actually it's no longer about just disagreeing with you, but I fundamentally have to hate you. I don't think that nullifies a covenant promise. No. I think your covenant promise is above that, so far above that actually compatibility then becomes about you swallowing your pride, the pair of you, and doing something to rectify the problem. And I'm more of a fan of that, Jen. I don't know if that's the right answer or the wrong answer. I appreciate there's nuance to this, right? And I appreciate for some couples, they literally fight all the time. For others, they may hardly fight at all. I do appreciate there's nuance to this, and there is complications and levels of complications. But I'm of the opinion that once you're in, you're in. And so you've got to find a way through.
Yeah. I think that was really well put. I'm of that same opinion, and also it's great that we're different. It causes, it's tricky, but like we've talked about today with the conflict and resolution, doing that in your marriage means then you can do it with your kids. You can do it at work because you've been there and you realise, well, I'm different to Fred at work. I'm different to Sarah, and that's we can still get along. Yes, you're closer, but that's the wonderful thing about men and women. They're different. They have different roles, and there are things that could really pull you apart, like political differences. And we were talking before that even a horrible politician, dictator, might actually say something true. It doesn't mean he's nice, but there's truth in both sides of things. Yeah.
I often think about, if you look in the New Testament about the way that it says the Holy Spirit is shaping us, you get, things like love and joy and peace and kindness and gentleness. Like in the morning service today, we were talking about wisdom and being peace-loving and, listening again, that quote from James, listening. And I think, find me two people that are like that, and I reckon they'll be able to make their marriage work. So, for me, that's the personal challenge. Someone said to me, about 12 months ago, they were talking about the fruits of the Spirit, which one of those things that I kind of learned in primary school. I'm like, whatever. And you're like, actually, no, you've got to do all your relationships with them. Because, even if you totally disagree on something, if you're disagreeing with kindness and gentleness and patience, then actually you can probably navigate that disagreement.
Yeah.
And, you can't be responsible for how your partner's doing it, but you can be responsible for how you're doing it. So I think it's such a crazy bar, and yet that is what God is growing us into. That is what the Holy Spirit is empowering us into. It sometimes involves a bit of painful humility, doesn't it?
Another great proverb says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a fatted calf with hatred. And it is that soft anger, that soft word. It's calming down and just
learning how to deal with the disagreements and the conflict well. And I think that can be done. And I think compatibility is, I think differently to Sharon. And thank God that I do, because if we both thought the same, we would have twice the disasters, really. Do you know what I mean? And I think because she can think differently, and I can think differently, that's really useful. Her brain is wired very differently to mine. Have you ever heard The Tale of Two Marriages? Have you come across this with Mark Gungor? Go and watch that series on YouTube. I think there's one where he talks about a man's brain and a woman's brain. Appreciate it's very stereotype, and so you don't need to write into me and say, well, my brain's not like that and I'm a fella. That's okay. This is a stereotype. It's just an illustration. But he talked about how in the man's brain is basically a series of boxes, right? A series of drawers. And this is the work drawer, so that's where my brain is right now. I'm in the work drawer. And when I finish work, I close that drawer. And the biggest drawer in the man's brain is the nothing drawer. What are you thinking about? Nothing. That's where I'm at, right there in that drawer, right? And to get me out of that, I've got to close that drawer and I've got to open the other drawer, because that's how my brain works. One thing at a time and I'm good. More than that, it's a problem. And then he says, but a woman's brain doesn't have drawers. He said, just imagine a ball of wire all jumbled up and tangled where everything's connected to everything and it all functions at the speed of light. And I'm like, that's Sharon's brain. That's my brain, that's Sharon's brain. And I'm like, we're wired very differently. And God has designed it that way, right? So compatibility is not about thinking the same. It's not even about reaching the same conclusion for me. It's about celebrating the differences, understanding that God has put you together. There are differences. Go work it out, because together the answer will be much, much better. And Peter talks about this, about inheriting the grace of life together, and prayers not being hindered because we're both going our separate ways. And I think, with compatibility, I think it's just such an easy excuse to say, oh, we're just not compatible. I'm like, whatever. It's lazy. Stop being lazy.
I'd probably add something that's just come to my mind as well, just to encourage anybody out there. Me and Jack actually really have hardly anything in common. That's my husband, by the way. Like, we don't have very many things that we both like. And, sometimes we are like, how did we end up married? Like, in terms of, when we're trying to find those things to do together to both have fun or whatever, like, I think it's funny, isn't it? I don't know if either of you feel like this about your marriages, but like, I was actually really attracted to you because you're really different from me, because you bring so many things to the table that are really different, and that's what made you really exciting when we were like both 21, and that's what sometimes makes you completely infuriating right now. But like, it's okay. I'm just, me and my husband have a great marriage, but it's a great marriage because we've worked through a whole ton of stuff. Over multiple times. So I guess, I wouldn't say we're like hugely incompatible, but I wouldn't say we were an obvious compatibility either. And yet, you can find a way through it.
It works, right?
Yeah.
It works, and that's great. And I think, actually, a humble heart, shared vision, we just want to build God's kingdom. And I think pretty much that's all. As long as you're committed to that covenant before God, I think God will help you work through pretty much anything. Would be mine.
There's a good chance that your kid's going to be different as well in different ways. So having two chances to understand and to communicate and to work is going to be better. Yeah.
Although Zoe, you're a lot like me, right? Sure. Look at the time. So we are getting to that place where we are reaching the end of our live stream. We will be meeting on Google Meets after this. Zoe will put the link in the comments. So if you'd like to come join us afterwards, come say how's it on Google Meets. We'd love to meet you and hang out for a few minutes whilst we pack all of this stuff down. Anything from you guys in closing? Sorry, I've just completely taken over the whole hosting thing now.
No. Totally fine. I had one thing which you said at the end, be kind. And that's not... Be kind is very different to be nice. Be kind it's mentioned a few times in the Bible. If you think about before you say something, do I really need to say that? Is this going to help? Yeah, be kind.
Absolutely. The only thing I'd add is be hopeful as well. Like, I just really believe that God is for marriage, and as Matt said, he's for covenant, but he's not for us sucking it up and living 30 years in something that's actually really difficult. He's for helping us do this well. He's for helping us thriving and flourishing and having great marriages where actually we work through this stuff in a really healthy way. So be hopeful would be my thing.
Yeah, no, that's really good. It's very powerful, isn't it? There's always hope. I've never met anything that is utterly hopeless, apart from a few men, but that's another story. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Next week we have, I think it's Will talking about fatherhood. So carrying on our conversation about wholeness in relationships, we're going to look at fatherhood next week. The week after that, I think we're looking at motherhood. And then I think the week after that, we might be looking at grandparents. I'm not entirely sure. So please, just be kind to me if I get it wrong. We're definitely looking at those at some point, though. But I think it's fatherhood next week. So do make sure you come join us for that. It'd be great to have you in the conversation. You don't have to be a dad, by the way, to be in that conversation, because we've all got dads. We may or may not be dads, spiritual fathers. There's a whole bunch of stuff we're going to get into. So do come join us for that. It'd be great. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully see you guys in Google Meets. Have a phenomenal week wherever you are in the world. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.